Hi, I'm Becky from Crafters Companion, and I'm here to show you our foundation paper piece pad, which we just brought out, which has got the all these little designs down here. So each one of these pads will have 24 pieces in there. That's 4 of each of these 6 designs. You have a toadstool, a bird, a butterfly, a heart, a birdhouse, and also a tulip. In order for you to put those together. It comes with full instructions, and you'll have 4 individual sheets of each of those designs for you to make. The next one we're going to do is a toadstool block. So you'll see, as with all of these designs, you've got your cutting chart down here with all your bits and pieces that you need to cut, all the fabric. It'll say over here any tools that you might need and give you measurements as to how much fabric you'll need in order to make that, if you're going to follow that same kind of design of colours and patterns. And then as you go through here, you'll see all the instructions, step-by-step instructions, and you'll also see those on the back of the piece of paper as well. So here you've got one of the templates, so you'll find that they come in 2 sections. So you've got section A, which is the top of the toadstool, and section B, which is the bottom. And they're both put together in exactly the same way. So we're going to start off by cutting these out. So we're just going to cut along that little dotted line, or just to the edge of that little dotted line. I'm going to cut out each piece here. Now the way I cut out my fabric is I would cut all my fabric in one go, and I was putting the fabric in little dishes, or little takeout containers, so I'd have one for A and one for B. I was also marking on there what number they were relating to this, and using that as a little bit of a guide. So I'm just using a heat erasable pen for that. What we're starting off with is the heart. So we're going to start off with A1. So this is one of the blue pieces. Now this is where using a fabric glue pen is really useful, because these pieces are really tiny around here. It's very, very difficult in order to put a pin in there in order to get the fabric in place. So this is really quite useful. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around to the back, and we're going to place a little bit of glue along that little section of A1. And I'm going to take my small piece of blue fabric, which is labelled A1, and I'm going to place that over the shape. I want to make sure that I'm using like a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance around the outside of that. And then once I'm happy, I'm going to then fold on the line between A1 and A2. So this is really quite a tiny little fold here. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter and my ruler, and I'm going to line up my ruler. So my ruler has the edge, and then I'm just stepping in, you've got a 1/4 of an inch marking. So I'm going to have that 1/4 of an inch marking along that folded piece of pattern and also the fabric. And then I'm going to use my rotary cutter to trim that off. So you've got a nice 1/4 of an inch seam allowance there. Then I'm going to take piece A2. What I want to do here is just line this up with that edge of A2 against the edge of the A1 piece of fabric, and we're going to use a little bit of glue just to secure it there as well. I'm just putting a little bit of glue basically where that seam allowance will be. Then we're going to stitch along this line between A1 and A2. And we're going to fold that back. Just going to put a tiny bit more glue just below here, just to secure everything in place so it doesn't move while we're stitching together. We'll fold that out. And then we're going to look for piece number 3, which is A3, which is a tiny, tiny little piece down here. So we're going to use the fabric as a guide, and then fold back the paper pattern along that little line there. So So you see it's a tiny piece here, and in fact we hardly need to take any of the seam allowance away. So we're going to use section A3. I'm going to match up those pieces of fabric. Again, I'm going to use a tiny bit of glue along that seam allowance rather, just like that, and then stitch that. And we're going to fold that piece over, like so, and then we're going to look for piece number A4, which is the blue piece down here. So again, we're going to fold back the paper pattern along the line where the A4 section is and trim it. So this piece is now a little bit bigger, so I'm going to use a pin just to secure this rather than the glue. You can carry on using the glue if that's what you prefer. And we're just trimming off the threads as we go, because these bits, you've got quite a lot of stitching going on in a very small place, just to prevent everything getting messy. So we'll fold that back over. And then we'll flip the whole thing. And then we're going to look for number 5, which is this tiny, tiny little triangle just at the top here. So we're going to keep on adding in exactly the same way. So you can see you've got your shape of your little toadstool at the moment, but you've got all this excess fabric around the outside. If I flip it over the other side, you can see the pattern's there, but you've got loads of fabric around the outside. So we're just going to trim these as before. I'm just going to trim to the dotted line. So if you've cut a little bit over the dotted line on your when you first cut out your pattern, you can trim some of the paper off at the same time here, but I've gone more or less up to the edge of that dotted line anyway, so I'm just going to trim right to the edge of that. Okay, so you've now got your top of your toadstool all finished. It's all been trimmed up, and you'll do the next part of the toadstool in exactly the same way, and then you put right sides together and then stitch along this seam. So your finished toadstool will look like this. So you can see you've got your top piece up here, which is exactly the same as this one up here, and you've got your bottom piece here. Now if you look on the back of that, you'll see that this is the seam where you've added those two pieces together. And once you're finished and you're happy with it, you just need to tear off the paper. You may find that down at these little tiny points, especially around these areas here, around the heart, it might be a little bit difficult to remove. You can either pop a little needle or a pin into those little areas and lift them up like that, or use a little pair of tweezers to tear the paper away. And here we have our perfect toadstool ready for your fairy folk to dance around to. You can pop this on some of your new projects, maybe popping them on a quilt or a finished bag. This is being made with foundation paper piecing pads from Crafter's Companion.